Hello, everyone. It's Lori Lewis, the director, with another episode of the Before the Big Day podcast. Guess what? It's episode 70. And you already know, or some of you may not know, that seven is my favorite number. So, what an appropriate time for me to come before you and record this special episode that actually was inspired by some of my current clients and actually by the book that I wrote earlier this year or that I published earlier this year called The Seven Must Do's Before I Do, Making Wedding Planning Memorable and Easy. So, I want to discuss a very important topic: the budget, the money that you spend for your big day. But before I get into today's episode, don't forget, give me a thumbs up on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. I am still looking for that first 100 subscribers so I can customize my YouTube channel URL. So please subscribe. Please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, leave a review so we know what to keep bringing you for future episodes. And with that, let's get into today's episode. So, the Before the Big Day podcast. If you didn't know already, the podcast was initially called The Director's Take. I'm the director. This is my take on wedding planning. And through some feedback from my listeners, I decided to rebrand last year and it became Before the Big Day podcast. The entire podcast is dedicated to those of you out there who are wedding planning. You will hear from some of the country's top wedding professionals, in addition to couples who have been through the wedding planning journey. And they're all on here for one specific purpose, and that is to provide you with tips for you to save money and not go into debt after the big day. So, how appropriate for me to remind you of that as I'm getting ready to discuss the big deal of your big day, which is money. So, as I stated, I wrote a book earlier this year, or excuse me, I published a book earlier this year entitled Seven Must Do's Before I Do, Making Wedding Planning Memorable and Easy. And as you see, here's the table of contents. There's seven must do's. It's episode 70, right? Told you seven was my favorite number. So there's seven must do's. The first one is establish a budget. That is the topic of our episode today. But just as a quick preview, please look at the rest. Must do number 2, choose your wedding venue. Number 3, choose your wedding tribe. Notice I didn't say bridal party, your wedding tribe. There's a reason behind it. Set up a wedding system. A system. We hear that word a lot in some of our organizations or our corporations that we work for. So there is something to having a wedding system. Number 5, avoid etiquette misdemeanors. Nowadays, we're getting away from our basic etiquette, wedding etiquette. And so, chapter 5 will remind you of some of those etiquette tips that you may want to rethink in your wedding planning. Number 6, avoid becoming a bridezilla. It gets very easy with everything that you have to do. So I provide you with some tips to avoid becoming a bridezilla. And then number 7, my favorite, schedule a date night. Doesn't seem like that has anything to do with wedding planning, but it actually does. Remember, your big day is just a day, but your marriage is for a lifetime. So again, we are going to discuss establishing a budget. We don't like to talk about money. We don't even think about how much a wedding costs until we start diving into planning a wedding. So, where does one begin? One of the first questions that I ask my clients is, what's your budget? A lot of clients will say, well, I'm not sure. And how do I begin? I'm so glad you asked. When you take a look at this graphic, which is included in the book, Seven Must Do's, it gives you a breakdown by percentage of a wedding budget. If you look at it, you will see the biggest item on a wedding budget is the reception. As you can see, 48 to 50% of your wedding budget is the reception. Surprising to some, maybe not to others. And you can see the other breakdowns: transportation, rings, stationery, the ceremony, attire, flowers. But the biggest part of your budget is going to go to your reception. That's the food, right? And the decor and the specialty chairs and tables. So let's dive in a little more specifically. All right. I created a spreadsheet, and you can open it up depending on what is your preference. This specifically is Google Sheets, but you can also use it in Microsoft Excel. There are two things to this budget, and I put in some numbers just so you'll be able to see how this spreadsheet works. So this breaks it down by line item. This tab down here is an estimator, which breaks it down by the total. And so right here, we are working with a budget of $15,000. And so it breaks it down by percentage. Remember, I said that the reception is roughly 48 to 50%. In this particular example, it was 55%. What's nice about this spreadsheet is that you can change the numbers. I can change this to 50% and it will automatically update, right, to how much you can spend for your reception. All right. But if you decide your reception is going to be, you've decided it's going to be 50%, 55% of your budget, then that means you need to deduct from other expenses. So as you can see, we adjusted the stationery budget. Instead of the default of 3%, we upped our stationery budget to 10%, which is 1,500. Now we're 107 at 107%. So we are over budget. So what this will do is allow you to adjust how much exactly you need to spend in order to get back to that 15,000. So if we take our reception budget down to 50%, now we're only 2% over our budget. And maybe now our payroll needs to be 8% instead of 10% of our budget. So now we know we need to only spend $1,200 for a payroll versus 10% of our budget. So you can play around with these percentages. That's something I would do. Or you can play around with the dollar amounts. If something comes up and you now have to pay for rehearsal dinner, then you need to actually allot for that percentage as well. All right, maybe it now becomes 1%, all right, of the budget. It depends. So this spreadsheet is interactive. All of the percentages, or the, not the percentages, but the calculations are done for you, so you can play around, so you will know how much you can spend in each category. It always works out well when you go to a vendor visit. The first thing they're going to ask you is, what's your budget? So I could talk for an hour talking about a wedding budget, but you really want to get yourself a professional. If you're really not sure, you're not tech savvy and playing with spreadsheets, then get you someone, your CPA perhaps, or your wedding planner that will sit down and help you go through your budget. All right, or set your budget, especially with the amounts. A lot of people are like, well, what should I plan to spend on florals, or what should I plan to spend on a wedding coordinator? And it really varies depending on what your needs are. A lot of my clients come to me and they're like, Lori, I have everything planned. I have all my contracts signed and settled. I just need someone to come in the day of and make sure everything flows exactly as I have been planning all these months. That's a different price than someone who says, I don't have anything done. I need vendors. I need a venue. I need someone to do my budget. So in that case, the price is going to be different. But the best thing you can do for yourself is hire a wedding planner, hire a professional that's going to help you stay under budget, all right, then go over budget. I just wanted to share some previous episodes that'll help. Again, this is episode 70. So you have 69 other episodes to tune into that are going to help your wedding planning journey. I just wanted to point out some key wedding professionals. Terry Baskin is a world-renowned photographer. In episode 67, she talks about some tips. One tip that I had not even thought of in finding the right wedding photographer. So that's episode 67. Kia Marie in episode 34, she's a wedding planner out of Chicago. She and I talk about the guest list. The guest list has a big impact on your budget. You have to feed every single guest you invite and every single guest that RSVPs to your wedding. So we talk about different ways to plan your guest list. Amber of the Velvet Touch in the metropolitan Detroit area, she and I talk about decor. She's one of the top decor individuals, if not the top decor individual in the metropolitan Detroit area. And we talk about some decor suggestions, and she even gives a little insider tip on what she does for her clients' weddings to make sure that they have a unique style, personalized, unique style on their big day. I also talked to many wedding planners. So, of course, I had to include this, right? Getting a wedding coordinator really at the very beginning will set the tone. You never know how your wedding coordinator can affect your budget. We network with a lot of these vendors, and sometimes just because you booked with a wedding coordinator might get you a discount with some of your other wedding vendors. So check out episode 64 with Lamiga Events. Check out episode 61 with the Real Wedding Planners of Detroit, episode 63 with Dream Celebrations, and there's so many more wedding planners, but those are some of the most recent. Also, if you need some financial assistance, if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey of Financial Peace University, Zach and Brandy, whose wedding I actually did, they were my former clients, but they have now become Financial Peace University ambassadors or facilitators. And in episode 4, they discuss how enrolling in Financial Peace helped them to have the big day they wanted, but they didn't go into debt as a result. So check out episode 4. Episode 66, another wedding planning, Melissa out of the DMV area, but we actually discuss micro weddings. And yes, we're in a pandemic, and yes, micro weddings have come up as a result of the pandemic, but we wonder if micro weddings are here to stay. And they just might be, because the other advantage with micro weddings, it requires a smaller budget because you have a smaller guest list. You have a smaller or an outdoor venue, which is less than possibly an indoor venue. So check out episode 66 for more on that. Adrienne in episode 45, we talk about Pinterest worthy weddings with limited budget. And so she gives her tips on those of us that create vision boards on Pinterest. So we talk about how you can get that Pinterest vision, all right, with a limited budget. That's episode 45. And then episode 29 and episode 48, I interviewed 2 brides. One bride specifically set $8,000 as her wedding day budget. She discusses how she does it. And keep in mind, this was 2 cultures and 2 venues with 2 attire changes, all for under $8,000. And then episode 48, bride Michael discusses how she got married in just 30 days. So she planned and had a wedding in just 30 days. So she takes you through that process and how she budgeted for that. So I'm excited about your big day. Here are a few of my clients who are currently planning for their big day in 2021. You can access all 70 episodes via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the podcasting platforms. The Before the Big Day podcast is available to you. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to share your story. I'd love to get some feedback. I'd love to even hear from you. What topics haven't we covered? I still have a lot planned for you. We're leading up to episode 100 in the next coming months, and I hope to hear from you. I hope that you'll continue on this journey. Share this with someone, either on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms. And I'm just excited about your journey to the big day. And as always, be well.